On today's episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, my film review is Loving Couples, followed by my segment, Allow Me to Explain, and it all starts right now. My film review for this episode is Loving Couples, released in 1964, directed by Mai Zetterling, starring Harriet Andersson, Gunnel Lundblom, and Gio Petre. Here is the synopsis of the film. The film details the lives of three different women who come from different backgrounds in a non-linear fashion. All three of the women are pregnant and they each share a backstory. Angela, played by Gio Petre, comes from an upper-class family who was later sent to a boarding school and experiences for the first time love in unusual ways that will be a part of her life up until she is at the hospital with her lover, Petra, played by Anita Bjork. Adele, played by Gunnel Lundblom, comes from a lower-class background and is told by her own mother that she should never trust men. Once Adele is older, she marries Tord and is unhappy with her married life and living in Angela's household as the farmer's wife. Agda, played by Harriet Andersson, comes from a poor background in which she was raised without parents on the streets. Later, she becomes a housemaid at Angela's household and had an affair with another man. So what do I think of this film? I love this film from beginning to end. It is considered one of the best and daring directorial debuts from a former screen actress who wanted to bring something different to this film from Sweden. The performances by the three actresses as the lead characters in this story feel so raw and organic as you understand their different backgrounds of where they came from and how they were able to experience love for the first time. One of the best scenes that I thought felt experimental in the narrative structure is when Adele is running from the hospital bed and is later confronted with the rest of the medical staff. She later has flashbacks of when she first lost her virginity to Michael before she met her husband. The overlap of the past and the present from the cross-cutting and the fade structure I thought was bold for its narrative purposes as well as for psychological purposes to understand what goes on in the character's head. I also admired the cinematography of Sven Nykvist for his amazing camera work on the film as well as the use of camera placement, POV shots, mise-en-scène, and close-up shots of the actors' faces to capture the emotional and psychological aspect of the three leading characters. An example of Nykvist's camera work is in Angela's flashback when she was a child. As a young child, Angela is in the dining room. She hears a group of men about to enter the room. The camera slowly follows her at eye level as she is crouching and hiding underneath the table. We are now switched to a point of view shot where we don't see the men as they enter the room, but we see their feet and legs as they sit down in the chairs and we hear their voices. While we are underneath the table switching from the camera's perspective and Angela's perspective, we also notice the body language of the men as they are seated and the way they move or cross their legs. Another example is when Adele is lying on the portable treatment bed just as she is about to go to her hospital room before she is about to give birth. We look at her face from a high-angle camera shot that is close to her face and switch to a POV shot as her character is looking up at the ceiling as she is being wheeled into the hospital room. Because it is a historical film that spans from the late 19th century to the early 20th century leading up to World War I admire the attention to detail for its historical accuracy in terms of the interiors of the houses and buildings from Jan Boleslaw that are specific to what the furniture, wall design, and architecture of the houses were like during this period from the interior aspect of it, as well as the attention to detail of the period of the costumes designed by Birgitta Hahn, that not only was meant to be reflective of the period in the film, but also reflects on the characteristics of the main protagonists as you watch the film, as well as their personalities, even if it is in black and white. When it comes to examining the three differences of the characteristics of its main protagonists, Angela started out as a shy and quiet person who didn't have a companion or friend in her life until she met Petra. When she was with Petra, she felt completely different, like a free and liberated woman who didn't have to fall in line with the traditional patriarchal standards of falling in love with a man and getting married and having a domestic life experience, and also because she is a virgin. Adele started out as someone who lived with her mother and father until the father abandoned the family, and she felt that men are not to be trusted, just like her experience with her mother. Then she found true love before she was married and felt free before she got married to a farmer, and her liberated freedom was gone. She now feels like a prisoner in a loveless marriage with no thrills or excitement in her life. Agda is more of a free-spirited butterfly who didn't have a mother or father but was able to flirt and seduce any man whom she wanted in society because of her looks and her ongoing personality that made her feel liberated early in her life, but also feeling a sense of ecstasy and sexual pleasure that she gets in the men whom she wants to be with. Some of the topical themes that I have noticed as one is watching this film are homosexuality, female sexuality and pleasure, liberation, and the gender politics that dominate most of this film. The handling of these topical themes, I thought were handled very well under the direction of Mai Zetterling, as well as the themes of childbirth and motherhood, as well as nudity, that feels very close to Mai Zetterling when making a powerful character-driven film. As I watched this film from beginning to end, I noticed the beauty in the way that the film was well executed in its direction, the use of sound to capture the cold and hollow feel of living in a patriarchal environment in Sweden during the late 19th and early 20th century, the portrayal of sexuality, both heterosexual and homosexual, the framing of the scenes by Sven Nykvist in the film to capture the emotional and psychological aspects of the characters, and the story itself that feels bold and fresh to a viewer's eyes for the very first time. Mai Zetterling, before she was a filmmaker, was previously an on-screen film actress who started work in the theater at the Royal Dramatic Theatre School in Stockholm. She first gained cinematic exposure when she was 18 or 19 years old, when she was cast in Alf Sjöberg's 1944 film Torment. The film was written by Ingmar Bergman, and she was later cast in another Sjöberg film, Iris and the Lieutenant from 1946. By the late 1940s and 1950s decade, she had appeared in both American and British films, often cast as an exotic sexpot. As she started to get bored with the roles that she was offered and played, she decided to focus on her next career, directing. Zetterling started making a series of short films at the BBC television network. This was her start in order to understand the craft of directing. While at the BBC, her documentaries were often focused on different cultures or people who were treated as outsiders in Western society. One of the documentaries that she made for the BBC, The War Game, earned Zetterling the Silver Lion at the Venice Film Festival. The documentary focused on two young boys fighting over a toy gun. Because Zetterling did not have the money to travel to Sweden, she starred in a soap commercial for Lux. That money was used to get her on a plane to Sweden. She signed a contract with producer Rune Valdekrantz for the film company Sandrews to get her first project financed. Loving Couples was based on a controversial literary series called The Mrs. von Palin by novelist feminist Agnes von Krusen-Tierna, which were published between 1930 and 1935. At the time of its publication, the books caused a debate on the topic of free speech in Sweden, and she was one of the most outspoken authors of the day who challenged moral conventions of how sex should be described and portrayed in literature. She would be the only female director working in Sweden at the time, and this is back to Mai Zetterling. The novels were adapted by both Mai Zetterling and her then husband David Hughes. Before production began, Zetterling hired Sven Nykvist, who was a frequent collaborator for Ingmar Bergman and his films. She had also cast several of Bergman's acting collaborators who worked on his films, including Harriet Andersson, Gunnar Lindblom, and Geo Petri, Gunnar Bjornstrand, Eva Dahlbeck, and Jan Malmsjö. Her film was released in her native country of Sweden on December 21, 1964, but the film was well publicized before its release date by the press. The film at the time of its release was well received, but also received backlash by the critics, with misogynistic language in their reviews attacking the film and the filmmaker. The film would lead to the establishment of the Swedish Film Institute that also created a support system that is designed to stimulate the production of quality films. The film received a Quality Award from the Institute and was later submitted to be featured at the Cannes Film Festival. The film was previously nominated at the Palme d'Or and was screened by critics, but it was not shown to the general public. but when the film was submitted to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival, it was banned because of its depiction of nudity, sexuality, lesbianism, and a scene of childbirth that was considered too shocking for the festival at the time, and even the poster, which was considered risque at the time, was also considered controversial and shocking for the Cannes Film Festival. I recommend watching this film as a character-driven drama between the three female protagonists in this film and their different backgrounds and personalities that dominate most of this feature. The topical subject matter that was handled very well for its time, such as nudity, sex, lesbianism, as well as childbirth, pregnancy, and other topical themes that I thought were handled very well for its time period, but may seem shocking today or tame depending on your preferences. But it was able to be photographed in an artistic and creative way that makes this film feel provocative, but not at all pornographic or dirty. It is a well-made film that features a great cast, a well-written script, flowing cinematography and lighting, perfect direction, and artistic editing and sound choices that makes this film purely enjoyable to watch. We will be right back with Allow Me to Explain. For this edition of my segment, I'm going to take a break from the news and focus on the nominees for this year's award show, the Annie Awards. While many of the other news outlets and podcast shows would focus on the other award shows, such as the Academy Awards or the Oscars, the Golden Globes, Critics' Choice Awards, the Producers Guild of America Awards, the SAG Awards, the DGA Awards, or the Directors Guild of America Awards, Tony Awards, Emmy Awards, Grammy Awards, etc., I thought that I would give this award show the proper treatment and how the nominees should be treated and received. So it's time for an Allow Me to Explain Annie Awards edition segment. On Tuesday, January 17th, the nominees for the 50th Annual Annie Awards have been announced on its website, annieawards.org. And of all the films nominated for this year's award show, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio from last year on Netflix has a total of 9 nominations, including Best Feature. Its distributor, Netflix, in total has garnered a total of 50 nominations in 32 different categories from film to television. Coming at second in the nominations is Pixar's Turning Red with 7 nominations. At third, it's a tie between Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and The Sea Beast with 6 nominations. At fourth is The Bad Guys with 5 nominations. And finally, tied at fifth are Minions: The Rise of Gru and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On with 4 nominations. Regarding the nominees for television programs and specials, The Boy, The Mole, The Fox, and The Hare for Apple TV Plus has received a total of 7 nominations, including Best Special Production. At second, it's a tie between The House and Oni Thunder God's Tale for Netflix, with a total of 6 nominations. At third, it's Love, Death plus Robots, or Love, Death, and Robots for Netflix, with a total of 5 nominations. And finally at fourth, it's Baymax for Disney Plus with a total of 3 nominations. This year's award show would not be complete with its own special awards for the contributors who have changed the game of the animation industry and have continued to inspire a legacy of future animators, artists, writers, directors, and voice actors as the next generation in the animation industry. According to the website annieawards.org, the first juried awards will be the Winsor McCay Awards, named after animation pioneer Winsor McCay. This year's awards go to Pete Docter, who is the director-writer of such acclaimed films as Monsters Incorporated from 2001, Up from 2009, Inside Out from 2015, and Soul from 2020. He is also the current CEO of Pixar Animation Studios. Canadian animator Evelyn Lambert, who will be posthumously awarded at this year's awards ceremony, was an early collaborator at the National Film Board of Canada and animated and directed a number of animated shorts from the late 1940s up until the 1970s decade. And television producer and writer Craig McCracken, creator of such hit shows as The Powerpuff Girls, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Wander Over Yonder, and Kid Cosmic. Next up is the June 4A Award, which will be awarded to Mindy Johnson. According to Mindy Johnson's website, quote, Mindy received this award for her continued research into the women of early animated cinema, for making positive changes in animation and inspiring those around her. The iWorks Award will be awarded to Visual Effects Reference Platform, which was initially developed by Nick Cannon, and no, not the Nick Cannon you see on TV, and Francois Chardavoine, I might mispronounce her name. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing her last name. To eliminate incompatibilities between digital content creation software. And the final award, the Certificate of Merit Award, will be presented to John Omohundro, a voiceover artist who has contributed his service to the art and the industry and has provided voiceover work in such shows as Bravest Warriors, Tokyo Revengers, Noblesse, and Mobile Suit Gundam, Cuckoo's Doan's Island. For my hands-on bet of who is going to win for Best Feature at this year's Annie Awards, I'm thinking Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio from Netflix is the hands-on favorite amongst critics and audience members, as well as animation aficionados who admire Guillermo del Toro's style of filmmaking and also his effort to bring his own traditional ideas to classic fairy tale type stories into his own work. So I think this film will be the winner for Best Feature, as well as winning the other awards for this year's Annies. For Best Indie Feature, I'm thinking that either Inu Oh or Marcel the Shell with Shoes On would be the hands-on favorite to win for Best Indie Feature. Now, Inu Oh is Masaki Yuasa's latest feature film from last year, and it had garnered critical and commercial praise. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, I think, could also win for Best Indie Feature because of its use of stop-motion animation, and also the fact that even though it is a live-action animation hybrid, it could still be able to win if there is an upset or it could pull it off. So that is my prediction of who is going to win for Best Indie Feature. This year's juried awards I felt was like a mixed bag for me. While I am familiar with Craig McCracken as well as Pete Docter, both well-known men in the industry, I am unfamiliar with Evelyn Lambert since she is a new one to me since I had never seen her work, but I feel like I want to learn more about who she was and what were the types of films that she made when she was a collaborator for the National Film Board of Canada. For the June 4A Award, Mindy Johnson, she had written books about the early women in animation who were often ignored or put to the side or basically put out as a thumb note, which I think is totally unfair and is very misogynistic, but she has been able to bring that into the forefront. The full list of this year's nominees for the 50th Annual Annie Awards is now available on their website at annieawards.org. This year's Annie Awards will air online on YouTube and will be held at UCLA's Royce Hall in Los Angeles, California on Saturday, February 25th. The award ceremony will begin at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but will start at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. For more information on this year's Annie Awards, visit their website at annieawards.org. And this has been an Allow Me to Explain Annie Awards Edition segment. You have been listening to Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. This series is now available to listen to at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and now on my new platform, Radio Public, every Friday. Make sure to go to my blog website at filmtalkwithjordanramirezpodcast.wordpress.com with my latest podcast episode on the page labeled Episodes. You can contact me on my social media feeds such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I am also available on Letterboxd. If there is a film that you recommend that I would put for my next review, make sure to submit it to my social media accounts. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.